In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this pretty cool looking roll-up toolbox. And if you want to make something like this for yourself, I have a diagram with all the more detailed dimensions on my website. And it's actually a pretty easy project. It took some thinking, but other than that, it was pretty quick. I tend to work with a lot of pine, but for this project, I wanted something nicer, so I actually went out and bought some hickory and aspen for this. And the first step in this project is to rip down the hickory into two 4 centimeter wide boards. And if you're wondering why I'm using metric for this project, it just ended up being a lot easier. I am American, so I usually use standard, but when I was drawing this up in AutoCAD, I tried to scale it so everything was a whole number so it was easier to work with. But because all the pieces fit together, that means if you change one thing, all the pieces change. So I would try to change one dimension to a whole number, and then the rest would change to a weird decimal. So it ended up just being easier to work with metric. These hickory boards are going to get cut down into smaller pieces later, but all those smaller pieces are going to have rabbets cut on all four sides anyways. So I'm just going to save some time and cut some of those rabbets while the board's still whole. You're probably able to tell from the beginning clip that the hickory is going to be used to make the hexagon side of the toolbox. And that hexagon side of the toolbox is made up of a bunch of different size and shape pieces, like you can see in this diagram. And now I have to mark out those different pieces. And since I have to make multiples of each of those pieces, I just made some templates to make marking these a lot easier. Sorry if you're sick of hearing me talking. I'm sick of hearing me talking too, but there's just a lot to explain in this video. So for this next part, instead of having to switch from 30 degrees in one direction to 30 degrees in the other direction multiple times, I just set up this jig to make that easier. And then as I'm cutting out my pieces, I am also cutting the rabbets using the depth setter on my miter saw. And the reason that I'm cutting out my rabbets now on the miter saw, instead of like once I have my pieces cut out, is because if I try to cut the rabbets on the table saw or router later when they're in such small pieces, it's just going to be really dangerous and uncomfortable for me. Last step of making these hexagon sides of the toolbox, I'm just going to round over all the edges of these pieces. And this looks nice, but it also kind of makes the pieces look like they fit together a lot better than they actually do. The hardest part of this project is over, and now I just need to cut a bunch of pieces to fit into those rabbets of each of those hickory pieces to make the other sides of each compartment. And to fit all the sides of each compartment together, I'm just using a little bit of wood glue and some pin nails. All these compartments are going to be connected with some leather strips, so I'm going to cut some dados on either side of each piece just to recess those leather strips. Also, for these smaller compartments, because the sides are coming up at an angle, they almost close off at the top. So to make things easier to take things out and put things into these compartments, I'm going to cut a small arc just to open up the top a little bit. And now I can connect all these compartments with some leather strips and some tacks. For some other hardware, I added this little leather handle that I made and some latches to keep it closed. There's a bunch of aspen offcuts from earlier, and I'm going to use those as some trim pieces, or I don't know what to call them, I guess risers. And the reason I have to add these is because I have those latches and the leather handle. That makes the bottoms of some of these compartments different heights. And so just to make everything the same height, I'm adding these little riser pieces. And finally, I finished this toolbox with some polyurethane spray. This is one of the few projects that actually turned out better than I expected. Usually when I make something, I kind of expect it to not work out on the first try and that it's going to take me a while. But even though it took some thinking and I had a lot of issues in this, it kind of did work out on the first try, and it worked exactly as I wanted it to, which is better than I can usually say.